Prospect House Media.
And now, prepare yourself for the only weekly podcast you won't want to miss. Welcome to the Ameritocracy Show with Troy Edgar, live from our studios in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C.
Hey everybody, I am Troy Edgar and welcome to the Ameritocracy Show. Thank you for tuning in and checking it out. It is greatly appreciated. This podcast examines the conditions for personal and professional growth and opportunity across America. This week on the Ameritocracy Show, I'm joined in Washington, D.C. for an insightful conversation with Mike Parrish, Chief Acquisition Officer and Principal Executive Director for the Office of Acquisition, Logistics, and Construction for the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs. Mike serves as a senior advisor to the Secretary and leads over 17,000 acquisition professionals, responsible for the department's $58 billion supply chain spend and over $100 billion in major programs. Mike and his team support the largest integrated healthcare system in the United States, providing care at over 1,200 healthcare facilities to over 9 million veterans enrolled in the VA healthcare program. Tune in for a deep dive into how the VA is adopting innovative procurement strategies and maintaining flexibility to respond to the changing needs, artificial intelligence, and new technologies. I hope you enjoy. Good afternoon, Mike. How are you doing?
Hey, Troy, thanks for inviting me here.
It's awesome to have you on the show. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah, I know how busy you are. We've been trying for a little bit to get together, and it finally made it happen.
Absolutely. So,
yeah.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. So a lot of stuff going on with the VA, and you and I have been working together kind of off and on since about 2021 when you came into the VA.
True.
Yeah. So what I wanted to do a little bit, introduce you to the audience. Everybody here in DC in the Beltway area is very familiar with the VA and specifically your role. Yeah, very eminent here in DC on a lot of issues around acquisition, especially with the VA and helping the veterans. But what I would like to do is to talk a little bit today, give people an idea of your background, how you came into the job at the VA, and then I'd like to get into some meaty stuff, if you wouldn't mind,
Sure.
where we could talk through a little bit of some of the technology advancements, some of the stuff that's been going on in the VA, and I'm very interested in a credential that you just earned with your PhD, if you wouldn't mind kind of talking about that.
Sure, love to.
So just from your background, why don't you give the listeners a little bit of an idea of where you grew up and how you came into this job? We'll kind of work our way up to the current day.
Sure, yeah, starting at 10,000 feet. I grew up as an Army brat. My father was an armor officer, so lived all over the world. My mom's German, so I was born in Germany. Was fortunate enough to be selected out of Colorado. My father was stationed in Fort Carson at the time, and went to West Point. So I graduated from there and decided to go off and fly attack helicopters. So my first assignment was in Korea and then Fort Campbell. And then from there, in the different advanced courses you take, I was able to be selected to go into the acquisition corps. So this is at the beginning of, right before the turn of the century, when they were trying to create the acquisition corps based upon the Defense Acquisition Workforce Improvement Act of 86. And so I was able to go to Stanford to do astronautical and aeronautical engineering, and got back into doing research and development and some test piloting and some cool technology work around the different parts of government. Learned a lot in that role as a program manager and assistant program manager. And then from there, when we had after the wall came down and it was the peacetime army, if you will, I left active duty, stayed in the reserves. I'm a retired full colonel 06, but I stayed in the reserves and went to work for General Electric, and was fortunate enough there to take 3 or 4 jobs and move around from here in the DC area up to Connecticut and then back down to the Philadelphia area.
Isn't it interesting that you and I talk about this outside of work as General Electric? A lot of the people I through MBA programs, GE, Jack Welch, I mean, that was the gold standard back in the day. You had to love being part of that company at that point, because at that point, I think Jack was still there.
Well, of course, yeah, he was my boss's boss. So one of my last jobs, I was working for the vice chairman, and I met Jack personally. And a sidebar story is I was giving a speech back at West Point, I guess a few months ago, and talking to the younger of your audience here that they don't even know who Jack Welch is, and so I kind of dating ourselves into that. But you're right, we grew up under great leaders, and we'll talk about that in a bit about leadership philosophy and otherwise. So, but back on my story is like one of the things that helped me in the transition area, and also while I was in GE was learning really the financial aspects of a corporation and of a business. And, from GE, I was able to go get a master's and MBA from Wharton, and so I used that to parlay into doing my own entrepreneurial kind of efforts. And I've as you know, I've run several publicly traded companies, small companies. I had my own service-disabled, veteran-owned small business that I was running and learning how to do federal contracting, and that was kind of one of the genesis of why I decided to come into this current role that I'm in.
So as you're in the military, you're getting ready, and you're going through. Back in the day, we would all look at the opportunity to go to some of the best MBA schools in the nation. So you got Wharton's Business School, Harvard, et cetera. You had to be super excited when you finally found out you got accepted into the MBA program and you're going to be actually going to Wharton.
Sure, yeah, and obviously we consider one of the best schools there. And I was living at the time down here in the DC area, actually in Old Town Alexander, working for GE Information Services over in Rockville. And for me, it's sort of like transitioning from the military to the corporate world. It's kind of actually a little nervous and scared. It's like I have no idea what I'm getting into. But I just realized somebody else had mentioned that they had just finished their Wharton MBA, and it's like, well, sure, I probably need to learn this stuff. And of course, as we talked about Jack and things, is one of the guys, one of the senior leaders goes, what do you want to get an MBA for? You've already gotten it through your experience at GE. And they were right. Mm-hmm. And so when I went to Wharton, I actually learned a lot of the quant aspects of understanding, like I said, the balance sheets and the income statements, and having that confidence is really the best thing I got out of it. And lifelong connections, just like in the military, part of our lifelong bond with fellow veterans. Mm-hmm. I have the lifelong connections with my MBA classmates who all have gone off to do great and wonderful things, both either in the private equity venture capital world or doing entrepreneurial startups themselves, or back into corporations where they're now senior leaders. But the biggest thing that I got out of Wharton was that confidence to be able to understand that leadership in the military applies to leadership in the corporate world, and it's your success is based upon not only your technical skills and your ability, but your ability to lead others and make decisions.
Yeah, Mike, I think that'll be really important for the listeners. I donate time, or I am part of the USC MBA program for veterans. So a lot of those folks, they have done unbelievable things, and but they go back to get the credential. And something that I impressed on the folks at USC for the MBA program is the quant side. Really, usually you're in a later stage of life, so it's hard to make that full in investment that you could when you were very young to spend endless times with folks and build that relationship. But I think that mindset that it gives you going and getting your MBA at that point, even though you've had that life experience that you may not need, I still think it was worth it. Absolutely.
It gives you that technical competence.
So all of these different type of experiences that you had, entrepreneurial, corporate, you were in the military, what kind of led you to make your way back into service with the VA?
Sure. I guess for me, one of the key things I learned by being a military officer and being a West Pointer is we're dedicating our life for a lifetime of selfless service to our nation, and so it's the ability to give back. And so I fortunately was retired for, I think, the second time I was a professor of practice up at West Point, teaching systems engineering and engineering management, which is that's what led me into getting my PhD, just because it's a lifetime of learning as well. You should always, my dad taught me, you always learn something every day, or it's a day wasted. And so, when I was offered this opportunity to come down, it's like, sure, I'll try to figure this out and see if I can help out with, bring my resources to bear, my wealth of experience to come in and see, what's behind that curtain, and that's what encouraged me to come back and give back to the federal government.
Yeah, the Veterans Affairs Department is very large. I don't know if a lot of people realize how much, you're the head of acquisition, so how much acquisition spend actually happens at the VA, and but putting in the context, first of all, the VA as an organization? Maybe you could explain it a little bit.
Sure, yeah. The Department of Veterans Affairs here is we're the second largest department in government behind the Department of Defense, and it's really broken down into three big buckets. And for all of us that are veterans, if you've not signed up for your VA benefits, know that it's more than just healthcare. And so your first entry point is obviously the Veterans Benefits Administration, and that's where you get your assessments and you also have lots of benefits, not just compensation and pension, but you can also get mortgage. You can have your GI Bill processor there for those of us who have children going to college. That's a huge help, and then it also helps validate in the healthcare side. And so transitioning, you don't have to be service disabled to get your veteran benefits on the VBA side, as we call it, Veterans Benefit Administration. On the Veterans Health Administration, we provide the healthcare and services. There's over 172 medical centers around the nation. We're the largest integrated healthcare system in the nation, and provide services to over 9 million veterans for healthcare, and that's based upon the disabled veterans. And the theory of the case is Department of Defense's mission is to fight and win our nation's wars, and the Department of Veterans Affairs mission is to care for those who bore the brunt of battle. It's not just us, the veterans, but it's also our family members and our caregivers that we provide benefits and services to. So on the healthcare side, while that's focused just on the veteran, it's the full plethora of services from inpatient to outpatient to just normal physicals and pharmaceuticals and whatever else that we may need for whatever ailments that we may have based upon our military experience. And everyone is deserving of that. And the third component of the VA is our National Cemetery Administration, which has over 150 cemeteries located across the nation. And we manage that for over 5.4 million of our deceased veterans, and it takes care of being able to provide that service, that dignified burial for all veterans. And you don't have to have, as I mentioned earlier, you don't have to have a disability to be able to gain that benefit. That is mandatory for all of us veterans. So I encourage us all to sign up for VA.gov, our VA benefits.
Yeah, it's interesting. You work specifically, there's kind of a fourth branch of the VA, which is kind of in the support side. Can you talk a little bit about where you fit in?
I mentioned the three big administrations, and much like in the military, you have the combat arms folks, the front line. Our main mission is to provide increased access and outcomes to our veterans. So our veterans are our main stakeholder in this organization. But behind that, you have your combat support group. So and us, you have the Office of Management, which does all the finances. You have Office of Information Technology. You got the CIO and all that area, and then you got the Office of Acquisition, Logistics, and Construction, which is what I oversee. So I'm kind of like the business arm, if you will. And in my organization, when I first got here, people thought, oh, acquisition, it's all about contracting, and it's not. And the magic of being a chief acquisition officer is an acquisition. It's really about life cycle, and it's dealing with the things that, again, I learned in the military doing program management is cost, schedule, and performance, and it's really understanding the business need from the very beginning. And so we have different groups that deal with program management, and then of course we have a contracting group, and then we have policy. So our first group is the Office of Acquisition Logistics, and they handle all that policy and all the federal acquisition regulation, the FAR, and a lot of the regulatory and the things that deal with the VA specific regulations and processes. And then you have the Office of Procurement and Acquisition Logistics called OPAL, and there's three acquisition centers. There's the Technical Acquisition Center, so you've got the National Acquisition Center, and finally you've got the Strategic Acquisition Center, and they handle the actual traditional contracting aspects. And then the third part that I have is that I oversee is called Construction and Facilities Management. So all the thousands of facilities that tie into those 170 plus medical centers that I mentioned are all managed and overseen by both leasing and construction by our CFM team.
Wow. Yeah, that and the spend that you're responsible for. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, the overall VA budget is, I think, for FY25, we put in a request for almost about $360 billion with a B. My piece that I help oversee is we do an annual spend of goods and services of about $61 billion. On that facility side, working with the Corps of Engineers and others, we have a spend of about $22 billion. And then finally, the major programs that we work and oversee and have oversight on is about $100+ billion.
It's interesting, Mike. I usually see you pop up on C-SPAN or some sort of activity because when you're out there representing the VA, a lot of times congressional members have a lot of questions on spend and kind of where things are going. Just curious if you might give just a little bit of your experience or in generic form of getting prepared for congressional testimony.
Sure, yeah. The key thing to realize is Congress is our board of directors, if you will. So when you look at the stakeholder breakdown, is we report, they provide us the funding, our budget, and they have oversight authority over us, just like civilian management of our warriors, and so it's critical for both sides. As I say, American first is to make sure that both the Senate and the House majority and minorities are all made aware of the actions that we're doing and actions we're taking. And likewise, just like in the corporate world, the board of directors have queries and questions, and usually it's initiated by a formal letter to the secretary, say we would like to talk to Mike about whatever topic it may be, and it might seem easy at the end, but it takes a village, as we say, and it's not. I'm just the talking head, if you will, because there's an entire team of folks from the different staff offices and the different administrations that help advise us and kind of be able to answer the questions in particular. So there's rehearsals, there's letter responses, there's actually written testimonies that are done weeks in advance. So the actual stuff that you see on C-SPAN is just the kind of tip of the iceberg, if you will.
Yeah, I learned an acronym that I'll never forget, which is QFRs, questions for the record.
Yes.
So you leave, you think you did well, and then you get back, and then you find out you have like 250 QFRs, questions for the record, and it's kind of supposed to be in your voice, but it's obviously the department responding and trying to be consistent on messaging. But I guess at the VA that would be really critical, but probably fairly time consuming.
Usually it's a handful, but usually there's follow-ups, and sometimes during the hearing when questions are asked, since you know that you're on record, and when they ask the question that you can't answer, you say you take that for record, and so it's a follow-up that we are there and committed to. And then the other piece you'll notice in the maybe too much inside baseball, but from the behind the witnesses is usually people taking notes and identifying or listening in somewhere to be able to say, oh, we got to answer this, or we got to provide this because Mike just committed us to this, or something like that. And so that's to your point about what seems a pebble. We want to make sure it doesn't turn into that tidal wave, as we learn in some of the.
So, Mike, from a leadership and taking over an organization, I've talked on the show a bunch about being the CFO. They're $90 billion. It's almost the area you have for spend, or it's a little bit more than the area you have for spend. But talk a little bit about, you walk in day one. You are a veteran. You've been in the military. You've heard of, the stories. I think we all, it's the one thing I recognize, I think, with the Veterans Affairs, like I've been involved with, I've seen you testify. I've seen a lot of the, especially I've been involved with roundtables for the subcommittees at the veteran level on technology modernization. But there seems to be a collegial view of the people that are on the committee that the one thing they love is veterans. They want to help on both sides of the aisle. And, but when you come into that organization and, it's going to, you got to be able to really quickly represent that organization. What was your process to, maybe a month before you came, your first day, the first, 3 to 4 months to kind of get yourself up to speed in such a large organization? Sure,
yeah, and it kind of goes to what we've all learned is leadership. Leaders, one-on-one or maybe advanced leadership. When you run a complex organization, you never want to come in and just make changes on day one. And so the first thing you do for any organization is look focus on what I say people, processes, and technology in the corporate world to be dollars, your budget. And so similar when I came in here is you want to take an assessment of the organization that you've now inherited. And so it's understanding the people, it's understanding the mission, understanding a lot of learning, a lot of being that sponge and soaking up things, and it's meeting your direct reports and your leaders and understanding, what their skill sets are. And I would add that, one of the things that in my experiences across, both VA and running my own corporations and B&G and otherwise, it's really, who are your veterans and who can you trust? Is really that trust relationship. And, the thing about what's unique about us as veterans, what made it easy to come into the VA is there's a lot of veterans. I mean, the organization is almost 400,000 people strong, and it's impressive on how dedicated people are in the organization. But it's really as a new leader coming in an organization, it's assessing how the level of experience and competence of your people, and then it's also assessing the processes and looking at what what you do on a day-to-day basis. Not saying it's right or wrong, but you do that first assessment, and then you can go in to do process fixing and things. And usually you want to take 30, 60, 90 days to kind of figure out the lay of the land. And, in the acquisition group of the VA, we have over 17,000 professionals, and I'm unfortunately not had the chance to meet every single one of them, but I now know where all their leaders and organizers are. And to me, as a leader, I have a philosophy that says all good leaders are good managers, but not every manager is a good leader. And to me, the big difference is, one is taking care of people, but it's also being able to make a decision. Decision in this, what we call, for those from the DoD side, the VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, is, the information that you've been gathered, how quickly or how much information do you need to be able to make that decision? And I think that what you learn in all major corporations, you have the people that are risk averse, that are really just they need 100% of the information before they can make a decision. It's what I joke, it's what I call analysis paralysis, if you will. Then you get those that are risk seeking, that just always want to take that chance and do that. And those are the innovators, and those are the people that in a low risk environment, it's great. And then you have what I call the risk, moderate risk, medium folks that kind of balance the time and the effort. And that's what the magic is of a leader, is being able to assess when to leverage the skill set of your people, who are the risk seekers versus the risk averse folks. And that's something that you learn over time, and that experience that you get by running other organizations from the platoon level all the way up to a major corporation.
Hey, one last credential I wanted to talk about before we start getting into some of the details of some of the activities at the VA is just recently you had completed your PhD, and I was interested to talk a little bit about your PhD, the focus on AI. I think I'm in that category you are, which is continuous learning. Right. But I was just curious. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you got out of it?
Sure. Yeah. And I guess it's one of the things that I always wanted to do was get my PhD. So I was going to do that way back in my Stanford days, but for various reasons, I was kind of jaundiced, that I got too busy with other things. And when I had the opportunity to pursue it when I was up at West Point being a professor, I figured, hey, it's a chance to go do that. Lo and behold, did I know I was going to come down here and take this role, which kind of put me back a few years. But the concept, I've always been an inquisitive person, and I think in today's day and age, with the speed of technology innovation, it's critical for all of our leaders to be able to have that intellectual curiosity. My favorite question is why? Why do we do this today? What's the status quo? Is it right? It's and the other part is, like, what is today's technology that we need to do? And so my PhD is in engineering management with a specialty, with a focus on artificial intelligence. My thesis was the use of artificial intelligence techniques to improve decision making with uncertainty. So that gets back to that concept of lack of information, imperfect information, and how can you make a decision? AI is a tool for that aspect.
So I was leading you a little bit because I wanted to talk a little bit about AI, and you laid out your three business areas, the VBA for the Benefits Administration, and the VHA and NCA. But just last week, the Secretary McDonough had his weekly or monthly press conference. They put out some very impressive statistics on benefits and the ability to kind of go through the benefits. And being in the technology world myself, some of us that are either servicing the VA or know what's going on in industry, because it's talked out, you guys have made a tremendous amount of advancement around really benefits administration.
Sure.
And so what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about was within the VBA, when you see the stats that Secretary McDonough was talking about, I think it was 1.1 million people provided benefits, which has exceeded the level, and there's still 60 days left in the fiscal year. And so it's great stats, right? Sure. But, one of the aspects that's talked about in industry, and so this is public information, is that there was a lot of technology that was kind of infused to do a lot of the benefits analysis, being able to intake information from the veteran, be able to collect all the ancillary information, either private medical, anything that they would need to submit, and then to be able to do assessments and predictive analytics and using technology and AI with the human in the loop, fully and basically working that together. But I think from what I heard, and I guess this is maybe a validation on your part, is that they were able to kind of basically predict with over 90% certainty what the outcome would be, just using models to kind of show thousands and thousands of cases being done with results and analyzing them and then kind of putting that into the model to be able to kind of help at least have a preliminary reading on benefits eligibility. Sure. And I was just curious, like from your perspective, that first of all, the stats are very impressive. Thanks. And you've been part of the leadership that's made this happen. And I was just curious what your perspective would be on this.
Sure. Yeah. Two parts. One is around the stats. We've given more benefits and more services to more veterans than ever before. And it's a direct corollary to the PACT Act, which was signed into law back a couple years ago. And so, there's been a real push from Secretary McDonough on down throughout all of his leadership to be able to focus on the veteran. That's our main customer, if you will. And so we've gotten the best ratings we've ever gotten from a veteran. Currently it's above 80% overall in the healthcare system. It's over 90% of veterans for inpatient approval. And so the 1.1 million is distinct users. There's actually 2 million benefits approvals that have been done. And there's an aspect to the digitization and to the technology there. And part two of that is back from the first question is I've always been a technologist at heart. And so, AI plays a critical role in the future of all things. But, you mentioned 90% efficacy. I would argue that is 90% good enough. And so, back on my thesis, I mentioned that if somebody bothers to read that 185 pages of litany is AI is I equate it to as I could have borrowed from someone else's. AI is like fire. When used for good, it could be really good. Fire is good for heating and for cooking and for light. However, used for bad, it's a raging forest fire. And so, I look at 90%, and I actually did because I'm a geek coder and things from my younger days. And so AI can be a good assist, but to your point about human in the loop, I coined the term human is the critical path. AI can't pull a trigger, AI can't do surgery, but humans do, and that's the critical part for all of us leaders. Is we should know enough and should trust some of the basic data, but at the end of the day, it's our call as leaders to be able to make that decision. And so, back to your point about what we're doing in VA with all that is there's lots of opportunities in the future. It's a brave new world, and there's a lot of standardization, a lot of things that we could apply to. I think when it gets to actual medicine, is the power of AI and quantum AI is coming here in the near future, and that's that speed of technology improvement. But that's going to help us be able to, the artificial intelligence model that a human is done, because it's only as good as the human coder, as well as the data that's provided. It can parse through that much quicker. So where things could take months and years for human eye to go through all the reports, it can extract stuff quickly. But again, it's the leader, the human, the doctor that has to assess that kind of information. So speeding some of these kind of decisions and having some assessments to be done quicker is the opportunity to go. But it needs to be standardized. It needs to be protected, if you will.
Two other questions on AI, just real quick. So you've got the best of both worlds. Like you're seeing what's happening in the federal government at the highest level, and you just got your PhD, so current thinking. My two questions are, in October 23, there was the executive order released across the government for AI, given direction. It was really probably more of a focus on framework. And, you and I know, talking outside of work, I service all of government, as the head of finance and supply chain for federal, for IBM. And so I get to see in Intel, I get to see in Department of Defense, FedCiv, national security portfolios, Justice, DHS. But the perception for the executive order was caution. And I don't know, like, when you look at that, because I'm sure for your PhD, you were actually studying the commercial aspects of what's happening in the corporate world and within the federal government. Any concerns on your part of, like, maybe the next steps that the federal government needs to look at, or do you not see it as somewhat, like, maybe paralyzed a little bit as we're trying to get it right? Maybe, like you said, analysis paralysis versus just pure application. Because in the example that we just talked about with VBA, I won't say it's full AI and the machine is taken over. It's used to give predictive perspectives that can be used by humans to make decisions. But that's an example that shows that the federal government's embracing. But some of the examples that I get in what I do, it almost seems like we're waiting to see. I was just curious what your take was on that.
Yeah, and this is where it's critical that we have industry's input, and that's that partnership of industry that I believe in government acquisition, government procurement. I think that it's part of a mindset and that I bring to the table. Part of that I've learned also as a leader is that willingness to fail, willingness to take that decision instead of having that perfect information and being overly cautious. I think that on the government side is really around what I mentioned, the standardization and making sure that we don't have one group off doing one thing without the other part. And it really goes around that human in the loop or that that trust aspect. And so I think that when there's small wins and easy wins to do, I think those are great use cases. When there's critical life and death decisions, like I said, targeting or actually major surgeries, then I think it's more of a risk averse kind of approach. But I would say that the government is our partner, is industry's partner to be able to get this right, to your point. But it's perfect is the enemy of good, as I said, is you're not going to get it perfect the first time around. And I think that we have time, and I think that with the speed of technological change, government has to change itself, and we have to improve processes based upon that.
So my background, I did 25 years in corporate, before I came into federal. And, you talk about use cases. One of the things that I realized when I was the CFO for DHS is when we wanted to get contracts out, which was in your shop. But you're in VA, I was in DHS. The amount of, complying with the FAR, complying, you have, contracts are very long documents, need to make sure that they're very clear because there's a lot of stakeholders. You want to make sure they're, from a protest perspective, they're good. I was just curious, back to AI, when you start to see the potential power, what I've seen a lot of use cases in the commercial side was, they'll use it to ingest stuff and then be able to ask questions or be able to ingest stuff and then be able to create something. AI creates something from something. And I was just curious, your view at the 50,000 foot level of acquisition, when you look at the contract life cycle and you see all these acquisitions, and you're spending $58 billion a year. Is the VA do anything where they potentially ingest all those contracts and going forward and be able to kind of more efficiently generate contracts? Because I would also say that the staffing to find good and qualified contracts people in this market is really a tough one. And so it would seem like the administrative part of contracting would be prime for AI. I'm just curious.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what you're bringing up is the large language models, LLM, and then the flavor of the day, the generative AI, which is generating synthetic data or new data that's based upon that. And, some of the legal regulatory information that we have out there for your industry partners is, in the Gen AI world, when something is created, we're adding clauses into our contracts to say, hey, that's, that data is owned by the federal government. And so, there's a lot of risk around ensuring that bad actors don't get some of the information that we have, especially around with healthcare, with those 9+ million veterans that we have the information on. So to your main question is, there's opportunities. We jokingly call it Mike speed because I do want to pull everything in quicker than taking months and years to award a contract. It should be, I would love to see it days and weeks, but I think back to even before AI, the fundamental truth of government is we need to make sure that we have those requirements right or those objectives right, and they're measurable. And then you can create a model to be able to parse through either the plethora of a 1,000-page proposal, or be able to assess, have some initial assessments of proposals to be able to get those contracts, to get to the winning bid solicitation.
Yeah, I would think like just sitting on both sides of this, now I'm in industry at IBM, but being there, I was always amazed when we would get a solicitation for something over $100 million, and every word counts, and that the vendors have taken every careful moment to get, most of them, to get it perfect. I just would always hate to be the evaluators,
Right.
and it seems like a part of it is quant, a part of it is qualitative, and the quant part could be benchmarked against the requirements, could be benchmarked A vendor versus B vendor, and you could almost get like, you can, if you go out in Gen AI and say, hey, take these 5 and what do you think based on the criteria of the score, and boom, and just see, and it should give you some sort of predictive. And I don't know if it'll ever get to that, but it just seems in theory, again, I'm a commercial guy where, companies spend money, really because they're in the profit loss business. So they, there's not a lot of ancillary stakeholders in that, but I was just curious your take. And it seems like there just would be a tremendous opportunity on your side of the to be able to manage that contracting process.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there is huge opportunity, but I think there's also risk if people are over dependent upon AI. I can see where, and just as a sidebar for some of those your transitioning audience members, is I've never successfully found a job through the Headhunters, because it's somebody doing that. You don't have the right word on your resume, and they toss it, versus meeting somebody in person and having that relationship and having your networking contacts. So take that to a contract evaluation. You're absolutely right, is that can provide information, but one of the things we've also added in, I think that is that final human in the loop concept. So where there's questions, hey, was this proposal written by AI? It could have been, which is fine, but at the end of the day, having lived in Missouri, as we've done, is we're not going to commit billions of dollars just on a great presentation. We want you to prove to us that what you've written on paper actually works. So come give us a demonstration, do a pilot. And that's where the human, again, is the critical path, is the decision maker comes in and says, okay, AI might have said this, but show it to us. And so, the idea is another philosophy I have is you got to know the rules of play of the game. And if that's an opportunity, then, use it. But what I would say for our government folks is don't rely on it solely as that crutch or that single decision point.
I would like to maybe have you explain Pathfinder, if you would.
Sure.
It's a term that the listeners may or may not be familiar with and very interested in.
Sure. Yeah, and it deals with probably my natural impatience or my own, limited attention span, if you will. And so one of the frustrations as I got in and looked at this is, and knowing from experience trying to do government contracting is, where do you go? And of course, when you get a big role like this, I'm sure you had the same experiences. Like you all of a sudden get about 15,000 of your newest best friends that, hey, Mike, you're CEO, you can get me a contract. Fortunately, I don't deal directly with contracts, so for your listening audience, don't come to me for a contract. But what I did do is we created this concept called Pathfinder, and Pathfinder is the fusion of acquisition and innovation, because as you look at some of this new technology and where back in the older days, 50, 60 years ago, VA was a leader in research, and VA did a lot of things like the first pacemaker done in the 60s, the first telehealth appointment done in the late 50s, early 60s, the nicotine patch. All these were invented in VA, but with the speed of technologies, no longer can government be that lead researcher. We have to rely on industry. And so how do we break what they call in DoD side, the valley of death? Great innovation is done, great research is done, but then how do you take that research and scale it to something that could be used for the greater good of mankind and also throughout our system? So focusing on healthcare is we created Pathfinder to say, okay, innovation, if one of your audience members has a cool new innovative way to solve cancer or something like that we don't know about, we're not involved in, and it fits our strategic alignment, then we then get a champion, and we create a mini project out of that with what I call strategic acquisition, where we already have our lawyers, our contracting officers, everything at the very beginning. And it might work, might fail, just like in the venture capital world, it's kind of 10 to 1. You have 10 opportunities, one will actually hit. And so we do the same thing there. And then we go back over on the other side of Pathfinder. And by the way, the website is pathfinder.va.gov. I was
going to ask you.
Yeah, for those who don't have any experience in government contracting, because it is a very bureaucratic kind of a challenge, is it walks you through. It's an intelligence system. I had one of the earlier doctrines I put in place when I was at VA is the EII concept. Everything we do must be easy to use, must be integrated, must be intelligent. So easy to use is kind of, instead of needing an advanced degree to figure something out, it should be really simple around the idea of, like, when you pull your iPhone out, you can figure it out from day one.
Intuitive.
Yeah, it should be intuitive, exactly. And then number two, it should be integrated. So it should be integrated in line to improving that veteran access and outcomes, but it also should be integrated across the enterprise. So we're not selling to one single hospital, we're selling across to the entirety of VA. And then finally, it should be intelligent. It should have that predictive analytics, should have that ability to modularize and grow and improve as the systems are going. So using the EII concept, Pathfinder is that intelligent tool, AI-based, that helps get people to the right place. So of my 15,000 friends, when they're asking, like, where do I go, the Pathfinder system can help get you aligned with what we call category management. There's 10 big buckets of what government buys, from IT services to human resources to travel services or whatever, and then that'll get you aligned to whoever the champion or the buyer is. So you're not guaranteed a contract necessarily, but at least it gets you the visibility to the right buyer, that at some point when there might be an opportunity, you're kind of in the system. And that's the greatness of Pathfinder.
Yeah. You and I had talked outside of work here. I went to, been a few times to New York City to the 9/11 memorial. I had a buddy. I was doing a bunch of work in Ireland. I had one of the partners. I was at PricewaterhouseCoopers at the time, and he was actually, unfortunately, on one of the planes that hit in New York. And I remember I took my boys down there, and they had this unbelievable museum set up. And it was kind of the experience of 9/11. You and I were talking, and you're like, Troy, you have no idea. I wanted to bring this on the air if you're okay.
Sure.
Just wanted to talk a little bit about within the National Cemetery Administration, with some of the activity with the experiential cemetery.
Sure.
If you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, one of the unfortunate things about being a veteran is most all of us have friends or family members that have served and or passed away we miss. Miss my father, miss some classmates also who were passed away for various reasons. But the cool thing when we talk about improving and using technology to modernize the VA is the concept of the Veterans Legacy Memorial. And so the idea is all of us, friends and family, you can look up what cemetery a certain deceased individual is located, but then part two is you can also send mementos and you can put pictures out there. You can do any of their articles. You can write notes to your family members and things for memorializing who that person really was. And I think it's a really cool thing, and I encourage all of your audience to go out and take a look and see. And it covers across the enterprise where someone might be buried, and then throw those pictures out there so it personalizes who that individual was that and what they did in their lives, as opposed to just being a gravesite marker.
Yeah, no, I think the ability to illuminate these heroes, to be able to bring them to life, and really to kind of help the family too. My dad was in the Korean War, and I have a couple mementos that were in the garage, and some of them don't make sense. Pool cues and dragon pictures, and then but no really war pictures, like stuff that was kind of going on over there. Was things he probably picked up when he just had a few minutes.
Sure.
And in that generation, they didn't like to talk a lot about what went on, so you never really knew until after the fact.
Yeah.
Mike, as we get ready to close, what I wanted to talk a little bit about in the close here is that I thought your story would be really important for veterans in transition. Mm-hmm. And I also think it's important for people that really believe in service. Mm-hmm. And so what I'd like to do is maybe close and just get your perspective on, what motivates you to drive yourself towards service and to trying to help the veterans. I mean, you clearly could be in a Fortune 500 company. You've led public companies too, but you've chose to make this your career, and I think it would be pretty inspirational to kind of talk a little bit about your mindset and kind of what do you hope to achieve as you are at this point in your career at the VA.
Sure. Yeah, I think as I mentioned throughout my careers, I was looking at opportunities, and I think the biggest two learnings I growing up with my father. One is instead of being frustrated about something, find a way to solve that problem, and that really is what motivates me on a daily basis. How can I improve something? As an engineer, and you kind of hit the nail on the head earlier. I wanted to say is engineers, we can quantify something, we can deploy something, we can do a lot of improvements, which is something that we learn very rigorously in the military. But then you realize that as you get older, the world isn't black and white, and there's got to be that user acceptance or that customer, sensing that culture, if you will. And so, when you think of the concept that my father taught me, either put up or shut up, it's not really. It's also not my highway, my way or the highway. It's how do we work together as a team, collaboratively, to be able to get to that end goal that you want to do. And as a leader, it's kind of a scary idea when you jump ship from active duty to reserves. I hope everybody stays in the reserves or comes out to the corporate world to do whatever good they choose to do, make money or otherwise. But the key part is we've all been there before, and find a mentor, find somebody that you can trust, that can help advise you. But at the end of the day, it's your decision. So one of the things I learned from Jack is control your destiny or someone else will. And, waiting is not in my vocabulary. So I learned early on when I got burned a couple times as a young lieutenant is like, trust but verify. A lot of that, I don't wait to get things done. And if you can do it better, then you should do it. So the biggest thing for people transitioning is it's not as scary as you think, but you got to, as I mentioned earlier, you got to know the rules to play the game.
Do you think that, just to pick on that a little bit, to kind of recast yourself in the business world, like your MBA that we talked about at Wharton, translating people's resume from, being on the battlefield or in a warship or in the field to coming into corporate. The activity that I do at USC, I think a lot of people are trying to kind of rebrand because it seems that a lot of the hiring managers in corporate, and I'll even within IBM, I know we work really hard to try to accommodate, but it's sometimes that translation to be able to kind of go through. And so, when you're talking to people, as you just were, like kind of directly to the audience on transition, any tips you would give on trying to kind of brand yourself, maybe not as extreme as getting your MBA at Wharton, but anything that you would see as helpful?
I think the biggest thing is get the experience through the jobs. I think that also for those that are still active duty, leverage all the benefits you get through the military. Get a master's degree, do other kind of trainings or other skills that could be transferable. But I'd also add that throughout anything, military or corporate otherwise, is we know the level of competence that we are, but there is that modicum of you have to sell yourself a bit. You don't necessarily want to be the spring, but always kind of overselling because people they do that. But you've got to find that sweet spot where you want to be able to get credit for the jobs that you've done. And I think another sidebar that served me well throughout history is, I've always taken the hard jobs. I don't know, intentionally or otherwise, but it's, if you take a job from an A player, all of us are good enough to do that. You'll be judged on how well that A player was. Like if you're coming after Tom Brady as a quarterback, for example, or LeBron James. But if you take a job that nobody else wanted, that's hard, there's lower expectations. And so part of that success is when you wow people, make sure that the senior leaders have that visibility. It's really around connections and understanding, who can help you to be able to move you forward on your journey. And, good leaders, I've always learned the goodness from, always pushed me when I didn't think I was ready. And they gave me the confidence that now as a senior leader myself, I encourage my team. I mean, using another football cliche, Nick Saban, like him or hate him, the greatness as a leader is he's got so many legacy coaches, head coaches, and that's the greatness of him being a leader. He developed basically the A team, if you will, of the college football coaches, and so that to me is a great mark of a great leader. On the other side, we also have had unfortunate experiences of having bad leaders. You can also learn from a bad leader what not to do, and so take every day as a learning experience, and that's that learn something new every day, but build your credentials through your results and through what you've done. And of course the magic is trying to translate on that piece of paper, that resume, and find a way to get around the gatekeepers and those headhunters, if you will. But I think there's a connection that you can make personally with every person in a hiring position somewhere.
So last question, either with the VA or you personally, anything that you hope to be able to achieve in the next 3 to 5 years, or anything that's really important that's ahead of you that you are looking forward to and still have not gotten all the way there?
I think there's always opportunities to improve, both personally and professionally, but there's also opportunities to improve the world or improve the organization that you may be part of. And so I very much love working at VA. The team, both of the what I call ourselves the temps, the political appointees, but also the professionals, the career folks, both from the entry level all the way to the senior level, all have that common mission. And it's rare to have a team like that. I saw it when I was active duty for a while, saw it when I was in GE with Jack, and now I see it in VA, that find a great team to be part of, and that's that keeps me going on a daily basis. So whatever I do, I still want to be part of that team that kind of helps improve whatever it is we're doing.
Yeah. I very similar to you. I had a great experience with the mix of political career people. And maybe because of my business background, and it seems like the same for you, is that I have a significant level of respect for the career professionals that are out there, and they really provide that stability and that institutional knowledge that's needed to kind of keep pressing through. I just want to tell you, I really appreciate you coming on the show, and I wanted to thank you for your service for our veterans. We really are very grateful for everything that you do, and everything that the VA is doing for people that have either gave what they could give while they were here, or that continue to contribute to our great nation. So we just really appreciate it.
No, thanks, Troy, and thank you for doing this kind of podcast and helping our fellow veterans to be able to transition or to find new opportunities, be it in government, corporations, or doing their own startups. And I'll leave you with what I always like to finish is thoughts has motivated me is, I learned something in history. It's, when you're in college, you don't learn a lot, but one line that stuck with me was what Napoleon once said. And he said, it's better to have never lived before than to leave behind no trace of one's existence, which means you got to make history. And that gets back to that original question is you got to do something that is remarkable, if you will. That's my mindset.
Yeah.
But thank you.
That's awesome. No, well, thank you again for being on the show.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks again for joining me today on the Ameritocracy Show. Be sure to follow me on social media and our website at troyedgar.com, where you can get more information and sign up for my weekly email. I hope you have a great week.